The Girl with the Emerald Eyes, written by Salvatore Haran, narrated by Henry Lee Tolliver III, also known as Midnight Man, the Voice of Midnight. Pacific Northwest, America, 1999. An air of unease crept out from the living room as harsh murmurs and muffled cries filled the night. Cynthia slid out of her bed and lazily put on her bunny slippers, shielding her feet from the hardwood floor that felt iced over. With a tired yawn, small fingers made quick work of the green robe that clung to the ground. She felt for the rectangular shape of the porta-pile in her pocket, opening the door. She made sure not to let it creak, not wanting to give away her position. The voices became clearer as she tiptoed down the hallway. "Roger, please, will you calm down?" Her mother pleaded as Cynthia peeked through a crack in the living room door. "You're going to wake her up," she said, far louder than she should have. Not that it mattered. "I'm already awake," Cynthia thought to herself. "Do not tell me to calm down!" Her father burst out in fury. "How can I be calm? Christ, how are we to survive? How can we provide for Cynthia? Did you think about that? Did you even think?" They were fighting more and more lately. Something that Mother did upset him. It kept her up most nights. The shouts echoed to her room, and not even the sound of her adventures could keep them out. Lately, she had been playing her new game, Super Journey to Emerald Island, on her porta-pal. Mom got it for her before the arguing started. "I'm sorry!" Mother's scream took Cynthia out of her reminiscing. "I'm sorry, okay? I'll say it till my throat is sore if that's what you want." "I want our money back, Lori." "Money? But we can't have it back." "God damn, my mother was right about you," Dad muttered under his breath. And Cynthia knew immediately that it was a bad move. "Do not!" "Here we go." "Do not invoke that almighty bitch. This is my problem. I'll take care of it," she screeched, tears streaming down her face. Roger got really quiet. "You know," he sighed, hand pressing on the small of his nose in clear frustration. "Probably going to sell the house now. I could get another job, or you could try working for a change and not pissing all my money away with that damned online gam—" His rant was cut short by Mother's hand slapping him across the face. An audible clap resonated throughout the house, followed by an eerie silence. Father looked up at her, then suddenly slapped her back, a bit too hard, causing her to stumble. Cynthia gasped. "You bastard!" Lori screamed. "Oh, get over it," he retorted with a dismissive wave of his hand. "This is enough for one night. I can't take any more." Cynthia started to step backward, only to cause the floorboards to creak under her seemingly gentle step. Crap! Turning around, her parents were staring at the cracked door. "Oh no, oh no. Oh no, 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 please." Lori let out a dejected sigh as she passed her husband. "Look at what you did," she hissed. Ignoring his annoyance, she began walking toward her daughter. "Cynthia, sweetie, we're so sorry." She opened the door. "Come on, I'll take you back to bed." Mom's hand reached her, and Cynthia reactively flinched away. Lori looked at her with a new expression. She was hurt and confused. Cynthia didn't know what to do. She hadn't meant to do that, but she was scared. "I don't want to get hit." "Honey, I'm not going to hurt you." Her mother spoke with sincerity, but the girl couldn't be sure of that. Her parents loved each other, and yet they could be so mean and so violent. Not knowing what else to do, she ran, ducking under her mother's arm and toward the front door. "Cynthia!" Father yelled. "Get back here right this instant, young lady!" His command soon became distant, scrambled in the rushing wind as she bolted into the forest. Dodging hanging branches and vaulting fallen trees, she eventually found herself at a small clearing. In the middle of the glade, illuminated by moonlight, was a tree stump that was just small enough for her. With a gasp, she stopped in place. It was picturesque, like something from a movie. As she ran past the tree line into the clearing, a shiver ran down her spine. The clearing suddenly felt different. She couldn't quite place how. Cynthia realized she was crying. The tears of her cheeks stung in the cold night, and she tasted her own snot. Wiping her nose on the back of her sleeve, Cynthia felt her lip quiver. Sitting down on a stump, she took out the porta-pal from her robe. It blipped to life at the press of a button. A delightful jingle ran out into the night air and filled Cynthia with joy. After loading, the main screen title for the game came with a chorus of 8-bit fanfare. Super Journey to Emerald Island. She continued her game, and Cynthia found herself in a dank cave surrounded by strange monsters. One had a glowing red eye and used its 10 legs to hang from the ceiling. Taking out her boomerang, she flung it at the monster, causing it to cry out and fall to the cave floor. Suddenly, the creature was back on its feet and scrambling toward her, its mouth chomping eagerly in the hopes to devour her. Cynthia blocked its attack with her magic shield and stabbed her blade into its evil eye. The creature's death groan clung to the air as it poofed away, leaving behind a gold coin. Stepping over it, she added the shiny coin to her pouch, knowing she would need it later. Time stopped being real to Cynthia as she became more engrossed in her game. Around her, the light was creeping back into the forest. What was once her robe turned into an adventurer's tunic, and tied around her waist was a sword securely in its sheath. Her eyes furrowed in concentration as she delved deeper and deeper into the cave before finally confronting the evil that lay within. From the darkness came the corruption that was taunting the island. It was her, Spider Queen Curry. The two fought for what felt like an eternity. Curry spat fire and shot sticky webs, which Cynthia had to roll away from. "I can do this. The end is right there." Her lives were running out. Her magic was low. Her sword needed repairing. Plunging her sword, Cynthia realized that it was the last of Curry's health. The wicked queen had been defeated. A congratulatory chime sounded from the machine, and she tossed her hands into the air with excitement. "Yeah, I did it!" 20 years later. Cynthia's eyes bore into the screen with apathy. She slumped amongst the rows of cubicles, a symphony of clattering keyboards ringing in haphazard unison. It nearly drove her mad. Outside, the sun shone brightly, but here it was hard to tell from the ever-present barrage of fluorescent light. Cynthia could barely see the outside world, only the leaves that obscured the parking lot. Checking the corner of her monitor, she saw that it was almost time to go home, and she couldn't be more excited to get the hell out of there. Her eyes drifted back to the window, and something shifted behind a tree with haste. Cynthia shook her head. Were those antlers? Tapping on the wall, her boss had arrived, taking Cynthia out of her bewilderment. "Cynthia?" "Oh," she tried to sound excited. "Hey, sorry, what's up?" Sylvester leered over her, his tucked-in dress shirt and dorky tie peeking out of his overpriced cardigan. He smelt of thick cologne that made her head swim, and he kept his hair perfectly parted to show his undershave. Being a good 7 years younger than Cynthia also pissed her off. "How's the project going?" he asked in an annoyingly high-pitched voice. "Good, very good, yeah, like super," Cynthia replied, trying to maintain her mask. "And how many forms have you been able to get through today?" Sylvester asked, puffing out his chest a bit to feel bigger. Cynthia's job was fairly mundane, monitoring complaints and suggestion forms for several major companies and then checking up on them. Each employee was held to a certain quota of forms per hour, and one never knew when Sylvester would come knocking. 200? She revealed, hoping to appease him so he would leave her in peace. Cocking his head slightly, her boss sighed. "Well, keep it up," he conceded with a smile before turning to walk away. His grin died a few seconds too early, enough for her to see his default stupid face return. Cynthia groaned, burying her head in her hands, wishing she could just scream so loud the world would stop. Later that day, free from the shackles of work at last, Cynthia drove down to her apartment's underground parking garage. Ignoring the dogs down the hall that yelped at the sound of her keys, she strolled into our small apartment. Eagerly, Cynthia kicked off her shoes and laid her jacket down on a nearby chair. As soon as she could, she popped the back of her bra open and slid it out through her shirt, tossing it into a pile of 2 other bras. Her mind went back to earlier in the day. What was behind that tree? That was so bizarre. It had antlers, but it was too tall to be a buck. And those eyes, like shining emeralds. With a flick, her lights filled the bland kitchen with equally bland light. Grabbing a shot glass, she poured strawberry vodka and took a gulp. It burnt going down her throat, but Cynthia felt like she finally had woken up. Banging on the table, she grabbed a glass and filled it with juice before pouring in another shot, then another. Maybe just one more. Shambling over to her couch, she undid her pants, letting them slide down before ultimately letting them drop. Cynthia plopped down on the couch, swiftly grabbing her controller. Like a well-practiced routine, she powered on her gaming console and her television. A game appeared on the screen. Demon's Edge Chronicles. A lone knight stood beside a roaring fire, playing with a knife. Dropping in, Cynthia explored the ancient ruins of a forgotten city that had been taken over by plants and vines. There was a certain beauty in the quiet of this world, a shadow of a once great civilization that fell to its own hubris. She found the bodies of great kings, long gone and forgotten. Carrion eaters picked at the dead eyes of a god. Wind howled with no one to hear, through ancient halls and moss-covered passageways. It was so peaceful in its destruction. Making her way back to her base of operations, now was a good time to stop. Only after she spent half an hour distributing experience points, repairing her armor, and talking to characters to see if they had any new tidbits to tell. Rubbing her eyes, which had begun to go red from a whole day of staring at screens, Cynthia rose and, with a lazy stride, went to the kitchen. Cynthia discovered a small personal pizza while shifting through her freezer. The instructions on the back claimed it to be oven-cooked only. Placing the pizza on a paper plate or 3, Cynthia guessed a good time for it to be inside and start nuking. She backed out of Demon's Edge and hopped over to a streaming service, finding a show to watch while she ate. Eventually, she stumbled upon a show she had been meaning to continue, Dance of Swords. The grand title sequence played as she strolled over to the kitchen and retrieved her pizza from the microwave. It was incredibly floppy and melty, but she didn't care. It was food. Cynthia decided best to fold it like a taco and eat it that way. On the TV, 2 people were huddled in some structure as flames crackled around them. They sported classic medieval outfits. The woman resembled a commoner, one with a fresh layer of dirt on her dress that was ill-fitting, stolen from a clothesline. The man was dressed like a hedge knight, his tunic embroidered with an emblem of a raven flying on a purple sky. "Sir, please come with me," the lady begged. "The Black Knight and his men will surely kill you if you stay. What do you have to gain? Don't leave me again. Siegfried, please." "I must stand up to him," the knight replied earnestly. "Someone must. Besides, it will give you the time to run back to your father, Lord Asher. Surely he will bring justice to these monsters." "But," she struggled to find the words, "I am your lady. You must come with me to protect me," she commanded, but Siegfried only gave her a sad smile. "After all we've been through, you're strong, my lady. You can protect yourself. You don't need me anymore." He tried to sound confident. "Yes, I do," she yelled, but it fell on deaf ears. The Raven Knight was already standing up, adjusting the sword on his hip. As he left, she tried to call out to him, but could only cry. The noble lady fell to the ground pathetically, and Cynthia scoffed. Outside there was only fire, death, and chaos as the evil knights torched the town. Up ahead, a few of them looted dead corpses. The music began to swell. Cynthia sat up in her seat. Siegfried drew his father's longsword and held it in both hands out in front of him. Rummaging through a fallen villager, the evil knight never heard Siegfried coming. It was doubtful that he even felt the sword that slammed into his face, caving in his skull, causing blood to splash across the ground and ooze out of him. Cynthia groaned. Oof. All right then, she commented. Siegfried placed his foot on the robber knight's shoulder and ripped the sword out of him, making the last bit of air spurt out of the hole in his windpipe. Across from him, the other knight noticed his friend's murder and ran at our hero, sword in hand. He took a swing, but Siegfried easily caught it, knocking the blade to the side, and on his way back, opened up the man's chest. Falling back, the knight screeched out in pain. Hands clamored at his chest, blood pouring out of him despite his pleas. No! Please! Did you stop when they screamed? Siegfried wondered, and without waiting for an answer, plunged his sword down into the man's heart, silencing him with a twist. Then, down the dirt road, there was a thumping. That's when our hero saw him. The Black Knight. A hulking mass of pure black armor carrying a greatsword. He held it out in front of him, tip buried firmly in the dirt. Cynthia bounced in her seat. Come on, mess him up! Siegfried thrust his sword out to the side, blood splattering onto the ground as he struck a pose. Your reign of terror ends here! You have been allowed to roam free, killing and pillaging for far too long. Siegfried grew serious. And now it ends. Siegfried started his charge. Cynthia squirmed. No, don't run at him, you moron! As he dashed about to strike, the Black Knight kicked up his greatsword. Dirt flew straight into Siegfried's unguarded face. He looked away, trying to rub the dirt from his eye, crying out in pain. When he finally looked back up, the Black Knight was striking down, cleaving the gallant knight's body from shoulder to hip. All Siegfried could do was choke on his own blood. Cynthia sighed. God, this show is depressing. With a groan, she paused the episode and clicked her phone open. The time read 9:39 p.m. She decided that today would be the day. Cynthia had rested too long. It was time to do something. While waiting for her computer to rev to life, she started a pot of coffee. Once it was alive, she turned on her favorite movie soundtrack, raising the volume to suitable background noise. The intoxicating smell of fresh coffee permeated the air and filled her with vigor. Slamming back a cup of hot coffee, Cynthia was ready to work. She sat in front of her keyboard, caffeine filling her, music swirling around her, the blinking line on the Word document taunting her. It matched a beat as if it were tapping its finger, waiting for her to begin. Nothing happened. Cynthia went and read through other documents, looking at inspiration boards filled with beautiful images, researching topics online to help inspire her. It wouldn't take. Cynthia played with a stress ball. Cynthia clipped her nails. Cynthia played with various objects on her desk. Cynthia slid her hand down her pants. Cynthia stared hopelessly at the screen. Cynthia banged her head against the desk. She had no motivation. God damn it, she muttered under her breath before abruptly rising from her chair. Strolling to her bathroom, Cynthia ran hot water and splashed it in her face, greatly annoyed. With a groan, she leaned over the sink and stared down at her rippled image. Why is it that when I think about existence, her words echoed out of the sink and back at her, when I think about being, what was here before me, before all of us, I seem to crack. Cynthia looks up at herself. We weren't supposed to get this far. What in the hell is wrong with you? Her mirror self said. You need to do this. You need to work so you can succeed in life. Parents sure as hell didn't help secure you a nice living, so screw them. You need to fight for yourself. Cynthia growled. Her anger rose. But how are you going to do that when you work all damn day? You wake up every day and do the same shit. Go on your stupid jog. Read the news you hate. Work for a spineless prick. Come home to play video games for hours. And now what? It's 9 at night and you decide now you can work on your... She lifted her fingers in the air to form quotation marks. Real career? Putting her hands down on the rim of the sink, she scoffed. No, you can't succeed like that. You need to do something with your life. You're just working to go home and relax. We are creatures of habit, and we can be trapped in that loop. We don't want to be stuck here for the rest of our lives, waking up old and wondering where it all went. We got one life on this earth. No matter what they say, it's one life, one chance of exploring it all and doing what our hearts tell us to do. It isn't this. Cynthia looked at herself, truly looked at who she was. Look at you, miserable, pathetic, weak. You fought so hard to be out on your own, and now you're wasting it. Your youth is fleeting. This chance is fleeting. She whimpered as the anger passed through her, resting her head on her arms, shuddering. A sickening feeling rushed over her, as if the worst part of herself had just risen to the surface and turned the knife in her back a few more inches. She stepped away from the mirror. Dawn slowly filled the morning sky with wondrous light, spilling out against the treetops and rain-soaked roofs. Cynthia's throat was burning with cold air, but it was a good burn. Running kept Cynthia active and alive. It jump-started her day, already feeling accomplished before she even got to work, where she would feel no sense of accomplishment whatsoever. Of all the trails she had found around her city, this one was by far her favorite. Weaving between the backs of apartment complexes that soon gave way to the bright green forest, this part was the best, the long stretch of trail with trees on both sides, making her forget about civilization altogether. The trees broke apart on her right to reveal a small path down into the thick tree line. Cynthia slowed to a stop and gazed down at the path that seemed to be calling to her, calling for her to step down and be free. Her attention was drawn to a large oak tree, and from behind it stepped out someone with bright green eyes. Cynthia gasped and kept running. Water droplets splashed against her university shirt as she eagerly ate her simple breakfast. One hand held a fork that lazily shoveled food into her mouth from time to time, while the other held her phone as she scrolled through various social media platforms. As usual, the world disgusted her. Another black kid shot by a nervous white cop. The ineptitude of our president became a numbing constant. Pseudonym Nazis marched with tiki torches they got from the home improvement store, held proudly above their undershaved heads. Children died in shootings, only to receive death threats when they asked for reform to prevent further senseless murder. Cynthia clicked off her phone in annoyance and fingered through some papers on her table to find a book, hoping to distract her brain from thoughts of the outside world that was spiraling out of control. Cynthia took the elevator and watched the numbers tick down until she was underground. She entered her car with a tired sigh, ready to do it all over again. Just out of the corner of her eyes, she spotted a dark figure with piercing green eyes. Spinning to meet it, the figure disappeared, a figment of her imagination. Her pace quickened as she moved to her car. Hands shook as she unlocked her car and stepped inside. Roaring to life, the headlights shone at a pillar, and then something from behind it peeked out. Emerald eyes shimmered in the light. A hand stretched out and waved. Cynthia's eyes widened. This thing is not human! Stepping on the gas, Cynthia raced out of the parking garage as old memories, long forgotten, crept back to the surface. 20 years ago. A much younger Cynthia skipped around the colorful glade with immense glee. The woods around her were fantastical and mysterious in the strange light. The sword at her hip wobbled with every joyful jump, and her arms pumped into the air. I can't believe I finally did it! Her youthful voice cried out into the night. I beat Emerald Island! Cynthia's jumping came to an end as she ran out of breath, quite pleased with herself. When I get back to school, I'm going to show that Todd McDoucheface that he isn't that special. I beat it, and I did it better than he did. McDoucheface? An unfamiliar voice wondered, causing Cynthia to shriek in terror. Turning around, she saw a figure stepping out from behind the tree stump, only a few inches taller than her. From the waist up, she looked like a normal girl about her age, with shaggy brown hair and a rough-spun tunic. Looking back at Cynthia were deep green eyes, her face wild yet angelic. Her ears resembled that of a doe, not to mention the small horns that protruded from her head. Below the waist was a bundle of fur, and her legs were like goat legs. The forest girl looked at Cynthia curiously, if not a little timid.
"I'm so sorry," the girl pleaded. "I didn't mean to scare you. I just heard all the noise and—"
She looked over at Cynthia with a critical eye.
What are you?"
she asked with sincerity.
"What am I?"
Cynthia scoffed. "What are you?"
"I asked you first,"
she challenged, crossing her arms. Cynthia pouted and grumbled.
"I'm a girl."
The forest girl looked over her with a raised eyebrow.
"Well, I gathered that as much."
"I'm human?" Cynthia answered with confusion.
"Human."
She sounded it out, the wheels in her head turning.
"Oh!"
Light bulb click.
"I've heard of your kind. Never actually met one before. Mother says your people don't come to this side anymore."
"This side? What in the fudge?" "What is this side and what are you?" Cynthia demanded.
"Oh, me? I'm a fawn, spirit of the forest,"
she replied with a graceful twirl.
"Do you have a name?" "Nerium. And you are?"
"Cynthia. What is this place?"
"It's wonder,"
Nerium explained, voice full of bliss.
"It's happiness. It's freedom. A place people can be when everything else is dark."
"Oh no," Cynthia groaned. "I'm not dead, am I? My mom will be pissed if I'm dead."
"You aren't dead,"
she replied with a laugh. Cynthia couldn't help but laugh too, lowering her guard. She took a step closer to the forest girl, eyes fixed on her legs.
Is it hard to walk like that?"
she asked nervously.
"Dunno. Is it hard to walk like that?"
Nerium gestured to Cynthia's legs.
"Guess not,"
she said through her smile.
"What's that?"
Nerium asked, pointing to the porta-pal in her hand.
"Oh, this is a port. You probably don't have electricity here, do you?" "You mean that lightning stuff?" "No, that's only in the far west, past the border,"
Nerium answered, as if it was common knowledge.
"Right,"
Cynthia replied meekly, wondering if this all a dream. Was she just huddled by the tree stump, freezing and hallucinating all of this? How could there be a forest fawn here with legs like that, and horns from her head? Cynthia began to wonder what this society was like. Magical creatures all living in harmony in tree houses, just enjoying life and each other's company. At least that was what she wished.
"Okay, so it's like a game,"
Cynthia began to explain. "You know how when you roll a ball, you can control where it will go?" Nerium responded with a nod.
"Imagine controlling a fake person who through electricity was, put in this box. With these buttons, you can control them, make them jump and fight."
She tried to explain, at a loss for words.
"That—"
Nerium began to speak, awestruck, and a smile stretched across her face.
"sounds magical. You can go and do things, wonderful things, all by just pressing those, buttons?"
Cynthia nodded with a grin, motioning with her hands how one would play the game, enjoying her curiosity.
"These must be very rare. Are you a human princess?"
Nerium asked with honesty.
"No,"
she blurted out.
"I'm nothing like a princess. These aren't very rare. A lot of older people don't like them, though, saying it's corrupting our minds and making us violent." "I don't think so,"
lamented Nerium, her shoulders sinking a little as her mood grew grimmer.
"People die all the time trying to go off on adventures. You do it from home where it's safe. I feel like my brother needs one of these. Maybe that way he'll stop trying to save up for that sword and focus on the things that matter most."
"I guess everyone has certain cravings for adventure," Cynthia said. A smile appeared on Nerium's face again, and she grabbed hold of Cynthia's hand, pulling her.
Where are we going?"
she yelped, being dragged along by the forest girl.
"I want to show you how wonderful this place is," Nerium sang. "We don't have electricity, but we have some things I think you're gonna love.
20 years later. Entering her small apartment, she kicked off her shoes eagerly, laying her jacket down on a nearby chair. After a pop, Cynthia slid her bra out through her shirt, tossing it into a pile with 3 others. With a sigh, she picked them all up, along with other random articles of clothing, and put them in her laundry basket. Opening up the washing machine, she dumped the contents in, threw in some detergent, and let it run. Flipping on the light of her kitchen, Cynthia grabbed the shot glass from out of the sink and gave it a quick wash before putting it away. With a yank, her refrigerator opened and she procured herself a cold bottle of water. She made her way to the couch and was just about to grab the controller when she stopped herself. Hovering above the controller, her hand formed a fist, and Cynthia turned away. Her computer came alive. She loaded up a Word document, and Cynthia began to type. The hours flew by. Cynthia had finally found the motivation to work, to do what she loved to do. Occasionally grinning and changing positions in her cheap office chair, her fingers just kept going, with no end in sight. Progress. She could feel true progress as the scroll bar grew smaller and smaller. Only stopping to crack her knuckles and rub her eyes, Cynthia didn't quite realize how much time had passed till her stomach growled at her. The next morning when her alarm woke her, she greeted it like she would an old friend. Swiping her phone to turn it off, she yawned, stretching out on the bed before rolling off it. Beams of light pierced the overcast sky as the sun desperately tried to break free. The sweet smell of fresh rain on asphalt rejuvenated her. It was a beautiful day, a perfect day. Cynthia soon arrived at the slope that led into the woods. Out of habit, she glanced around to admire the path. A figure stood behind one of the trees. Its green eyes quickly hid behind the evergreen. She glared down the dirt path to the woods. "Hey! Who's there?" she cried out, demanding an answer. Looking around her, Cynthia saw no one else on the trail. With a tired sigh, she descended into the forest, keeping herself steady on the steep downhill slope. She wandered down the path as it snaked between densely packed trees, following the clearings as best as she could. Looking over her shoulder, the path she had just taken was gone. The forest had closed in behind her.
What in the hell am I doing?
Cynthia grunted as she pushed past the hanging branches that wanted to suffocate her. Hearing the rushing of water, she finally found a way out of the woods. At the end of the dirt path, she found a river that ran deeper into the forest. Walking along the riverbank, Cynthia discovered an old bridge missing bits of stone with vines tangled around it. On the other side sat a circular glade that drew her nearer, wanting her to come. Placing a foot down on the bridge, it felt sturdy enough despite its age. Carefully, she walked across it, unsure why she was doing this. In the sky, the sun had broken apart the clustered clouds and was shining splendidly on her. Crossing the center of the bridge, a shiver ran down her spine, as if she had just stepped over her own grave. Pausing on the bridge, she shuddered, feeling goosebumps form along her arms and legs. I felt this before. The hair on the back of her neck stood up, and for a moment, she almost turned back. Except that someone stepped out from behind a tree, a tall figure with green eyes.
Well, I love that outfit. Makes you look cute,
Nerium complimented. It was the forest girl from her childhood dreams, all grown up.
Or were they dreams? I don't know anymore.
Bare of any clothes, she stood there, taller than Cynthia remembered. Her ears perked up, excited to see her. Nerium's horns had grown into beautiful antlers that held up a gorgeously intricate wreath of various budding flowers.
Oh, shit. I'm dreaming.
This has got to be some weird dream, Cynthia denied it, stumbling backward, but some force pushed her forward, like an invisible wall. Nerium's deep green eyes lost their twinkle. Pain and confusion rushed across her face.
No, not a dream. I'm real, Cynthia. I'm here,
Nerium said as she glided to her, causing Cynthia to flinch for a moment, hesitant. The forest girl gently placed Cynthia's hand on her face, and she could feel her warmth.
See? Real as real can get, she chimed with a sad smile.
Taking a step back, Cynthia shook her head.
I can't be here. Last time I was gone for so long, nearly scared my parents to death, she said, choking up. Darling, what's wrong? You've only been gone a few days. How was your trip to Cedar Sprout?
Don't tell me those nasty fairies played a trick on you. Nerium inched closer with worry-filled words. Everything seemed artificial, fake. That couldn't have been real, right? A whole life flashed in her mind. Years of adventure, excitement, and love. Could it be true? She grabbed at her head, which felt like it was swimming.
Oh, I think I'm going to be sick,
Cynthia muttered before falling to the ground. Kneeling down, Nerium held her up, cradling Cynthia in her arms as she writhed on the ground in pain.
Are you okay? What's happening?
She urged, combing a hand through her hair.
I had forgotten,
Cynthia managed. I thought this was all fake, just my mind coping with what happened.
Like it was some long dream, a warm dream, so comforting.
Nerium sat back, her face growing stern.
It happened,
she sighed.
Didn't it? You went back there. Was any of it real?
Cynthia wondered, feeling safe in her arms.
This world is,
Nerium sniffled,
more complicated than you might think. I had forgotten everything. I only recently started to remember. Because your life lacks focus and meaning, she explained, gently rocking. You know you have to find a purpose, but have none. That's why you're back here, with me. It feels like my world is falling apart, like I'm falling apart. I'm tired all the time, so weak, just doing meaningless things to fill the hours, unable to motivate myself. Then stay here with me,
Nerium whispered, holding her tighter.
I would love that, Cynthia admitted. But this isn't real. I have a life out there, responsibilities, things I need to get done. A life that you despise. A life I need to take hold of and do something with,
Cynthia grunted as she rose, brushing the dirt from her runner's outfit.
This isn't my life.
It's yours.
I understand,
Nerium replied meekly, rising up, turning to conceal her tears. Cynthia wanted to reach out, wanted to hold her and make her happy, but she couldn't.
I'm sorry, Nerium,
she whimpered.
Enjoy life, my love.
She turned back, her eyes twinkled.
You deserve it.
With that, Nerium turned away from her for the last time, stepping back into the magical woods where she belonged. Running up to the tree line, Cynthia tried to catch one last glimpse of her, but Nerium was gone. Suddenly, she realized everything she had just given up. The majestic castles with their wise old kings, stunning waterfalls that spawned dozens of rainbows, jaw-dropping magical vistas. Nerium's arms around her one last time.
I should have gone with her,
she muttered.
It's not real, she realized. You need to focus on you. This is another video game, another show, another book, a distraction. There's a chance for happiness out there.
Resolute, Cynthia turned to leave, only to find an imposingly large figure standing in the middle of the bridge, a giant sword held out in front of him. A knight in black armor. Shocked by his sudden appearance, she stumbled back. Lucky that a tree was there to catch her fall. The Black Knight simply stood there, unmoving, his eyes hidden under his massive armor that seemed to drain the color from the world. Even still, she could feel him watching her. The closer she got, the larger he looked, and it didn't help that the knight stood at the crest of the bridge.
"You're blocking the path, sir."
Cynthia tried to sound formidable. The two lingered in a moment of awful silence before finally the knight replied, "I know. That is my sacred burden."
"Well, then how do I get past you?"
"You don't," he said bluntly. "You go into the forest and live a jubilant life. Or you advance at me, and it will be a short one."
"I am leaving this forest," she declared.
Are you? He challenged. Silence fell over them once more. Cynthia let out a frustrated sigh, rubbing her temple anxiously. Pausing, she had an idea.
Sir,
she called out, getting his attention.
Are you an honorable knight?
It is a tremendous honor to safeguard the gateway betwixt worlds, the knight boasted.
And being this sacred protector of worlds, would you strike down a woman without even giving her a chance to defend herself?
The Black Knight scoffed, shrugging his shoulders, his huge pauldron scraping against the rest of his armor. Erupting between them was a great fire in the center of a ring of stones she had not noticed before. From the fire, a sword emerged. Cynthia first spotted the hilt rising from the tops of the flames. The blade soon followed, glowing in the fires. Ash flew up into the air. Almost as soon as it started, the fire subsided. All that remained was a sword sticking out of a pool of ash. If you need rest, the knight announced, now is the time. For once you draw that sword of ash, it may be the last breath you draw. Cynthia stepped up to the sword and sat down in front of it. With a sigh, she began to evaluate her options. She knew what she had to do, just didn't ever imagine she would have to literally fight for it. It was the right decision. She was sure of that much. This knight was all that stood in the way of her freedom. He's slow. Be careful, a familiar voice seemed to say. Opening her eyes, she grabbed the embedded sword. With a grunt, she slashed the blade at the knight, sending cinders through his soulless visor. The great knight wailed and stumbled backward. Running at him, she quickly jabbed under his arms that were raised to grab at his face. He recoiled, wildly spinning his greatsword about. Cynthia ducked underneath the swing and stepped aside. With a painful groan, he took up the sword with both hands and glared at Cynthia. It is you who lack honor, outworlder! The knight charged at her and made a mighty broad slash. Deftly, she rolled under it, slicing desperately at his back, and looked for an opening. With a steel boot, he kicked backward, barreling her skidding across the ground. Smoke and ash were sent up into the air like a dark cloud that marked death. Soot stained her clothes and smudged her face. In a coughing fit, she struggled to get off the ground. Suddenly, the sun vanished, but in truth, it was the knight winding up a downward hack. Rolling out of the way, she managed to dodge, stumbling back to her feet. Quickly, the knight turned, aiming his sword straight at her. She kept her eyes on him, and the two circled each other, Cynthia with her sword resting on her arm, the tip pointed at the knight.
You can just get out of the way. We can still stop this,
she pleaded. This stops when your heart does, he shouted and ran at her, his sword swiping at her side. Dodging out of the way, she parried, looking at the top of his blade in her crossguard, using the momentum to thrust his sword down. It was just enough time that she needed to quickly slide hers upward, piercing the tip up through his neck. The tip shot out of the back of the knight's neck, followed by a confetti of blood. With a savage scream, she pushed the blade in further, the crossguard now just under his chin. The knight's greatsword clattered to the ground as he sank to his knees. His hands rose to his head, removing the helmet and sliding off his coif, allowing them both to fall to the dirt. Ah, Cynthia, you've done it! Sylvester spoke, despite the sword in his throat. A confused gasp was all she could muster.
You killed me. Now what are you going to do? Go back home and pretend nothing is wrong? That you're fine?
The face of her boss began to morph and twist into the likeness of her father. Nothing is fine, girl. You're gonna fall into the same boring pattern, her father chided. Do you know how many times you've been here, killing us? Every time you go home and forget the stalwart promises you make here. The switch happened again. Eyes were swapped for different ones as muscles moved to form the new face. Mother.
You know what is wrong with your life, but you do nothing to change it. You whine and complain, and yet... her mother smiled. Here we are. Give it another few months. Maybe after you beat that game or finish that show, you'll sit there in the silence of the credits and realize the time you could have used to further yourself. This time it was different, like the face was unsure how to transform. The others seemed to be fighting this newcomer. They screamed in defiance, but it didn't work. It was Nerium. Don't listen to them, my love. We can all change if given a big enough push. Allow yourself time to relax and enjoy life, but also pursue your dreams. You'll be gone someday. Do not look back with regret. Look back on life with a smile, she begged. But the faces took back control. They spun and shifted like a puzzle being shaken up, each pining for control over the others in a desperate attack to chastise her. Now don't you listen to that bitch, her boss screamed. She doesn't know what's good for you, not like I do, her mother ranted.
She just wants to use you. You're too trusting,
her dad scolded.
We all know what kind of person you are. Sad and pathetic, knowing what needs to be done but not having the courage to act upon it. You're a failure. You're nothing.
Shut up,
Cynthia demanded, pulling the blade out of their neck and in one swift motion chopped off the knight's head. It tumbled to the ground, his body followed with a thump that could rival war drums. Stepping over the body, she inspected the head, which was stuck mid-transformation between the three of them. A grotesque thing with 5 eyes, 2 mouths, and ears that overlapped each other. Each face was screaming in agony. Passing the mound of ash, she firmly planted the sword back in its place, causing the fire to be rekindled before pushing the sword back down. With towering pride, Cynthia stepped across the bridge, making it all the way across. An immense weight was lifted off her exhausted shoulders, and when she looked back, all she saw was an empty clearing. Cynthia smiled. She would miss the girl with emerald eyes.